Hey everybody, welcome to the post-show Q&A. I am the sort of Q guy, and the A guy is Béla Fleck. I'm Ed
What are you
Helms.
saying?
What?
What are you saying?
I don't know. It's a Q&A, right? Uh,
I'll be
this
the A
is,
guy.
yeah. Um, you're giving the answers. I'm throwing the questions. We're gonna be looking at a lot of questions that you guys are some that were sent in previously, and of course, feel free to keep posting questions. We'll try to work in as many as we can, but there's just no guarantee. I mean, I got a lot of questions, and I could wind up hogging this whole show. So who knows? But no, we're gonna get to a bunch, and thank you for being here, Béla. How's it going?
Oh, it's going good. Life
All
is
right.
good. Now, can I ask a few questions too?
That wasn't the deal. That wasn't the arrangement, but
See what happens.
okay. All right. Well, I do want to start with just, can you tell us a little bit about the show that we just saw?
Yeah,
What context there?
that was our first show, and our only show of this new band that's playing the music from this new album. The album is with a whole bunch of people, like I think 20 musicians, something like that, from all over our bluegrass community, different ages, different styles, and so forth. But this was the band that was going to go out and tour. In fact, we're about to start a tour, and so um, Rocky Grass and Planet Bluegrass was kind enough to bring us in to play, and that was our, let's learn this music. This is hard music. Let's figure out how we can get through this stuff. And everybody busted their parts to get learn this music learned. I mean, we were just practicing like fools, and it really felt good. I mean, I think people like us really enjoy that kind of practice. So in a way, it sounds like we're suffering and I'm complaining, but actually, it's just such a joy to do it with people that are digging it. Where if you're
Yeah,
playing with people
of
that are
course.
not enjoying it, it's a drag and everybody's having a bum time. But in this case, you can hear how these folks play. They played with just so much heart and soul, and they hit the hard stuff and they hit the simpler stuff. They just played with they played their hearts out, and so I'm thrilled, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens like next week when we go out on tour. Like what happens after 3 days, because that's the first gig. It's kind of crazy. So
It's
it's
going to go
thrilling.
downhill.
Yeah,
It's going to
probably.
get worse.
Yeah, it very well
There's
could.
going to be infighting. There's going to be competition. A lot of people are going to be stealing solos from each other. It's going to get ugly.
Especially in the banjo department. That's where it
Yeah,
tends to sag
it
a
gets
little bit
ugly.
anyway, usually,
It's
yeah.
so wait, how? So this is incredibly complex, and it's just the music obviously takes a lot of concentration, focus, and diligence on the part of all these musicians. How much rehearsal went into this show?
Well, there were two 3-day rehearsals. That's actually, but the secret weapon was that I sent everybody the music ahead of time, and I also got them versions of each song with their instrument muted away, so they could play along. Once they had learned it, they'd have a way to just play it down, and I did the same. So by the time we got there, we were all used to playing with the tracks. And in a lot of cases they had played the tracks live, but not on the same songs. They're
Right,
all on
right.
the record, except Justin, who is our pinch hitter, who just came in. I guess quarterback. What is he? Whatever he is, he just
Pinch
plays
quarterback.
everything. Yeah, something like that. And he's just amazing. He just plays so many instruments so well. It's just kind of ridiculous. Because I couldn't have brought, a dobro player, a second fiddler, and banjo player and a mandolin player along as
Yeah.
well. But this one guy does everything. So he was, in a lot of ways, the perfect person and the only person who could have done that. But anyway, yeah. So we were up late playing the night before. We were up in the morning doing an early morning sound check. We were playing for days in the heat, and they were outdoor rehearsals because, of course, COVID times, masked and distanced, and there were a lot of challenges. But everybody,
Grinding it out.
yeah.
How? So I remember seeing you at Telluride one time, and you were gonna do a solo set, just you and your banjo, and and you were practicing backstage, and I remember you saying something like uh, about how you were feeling kind of nervous, and
Oh
I
yeah.
and I remember thinking like, what the hell are you nervous about? Like, what you've got skills for days. You can do anything on that instrument. Um, a show like this, it's the premiere of a big, it's a big presentation. It's being recorded. It's new music that you've composed. You've put your heart and soul into this thing. How does someone like you, the consummate professional, where are your nerves in that situation? And
Well,
then how do you manage it?
I think it's because I know I can play well, but I can't do it all the time. And
Yeah,
I think music is a moving target. So like one day you're like, I got this down. The next day you're sucking. You just you can't make it happen. So you just never know whether the big gigs are going to be the ones where you can make it happen, or the big gig is going to be one where you're stinking. And I always feel like I play the best under low pressure. Like if I'm playing a smaller market somewhere, and we've got 5 dates, and in a weird way, you switch off your worry mode, and I don't know what I'm worried about. I mean, we all play the way we play. You can't really hide it one way or another, but there is an ultimate we hit one once in a while, and you're
yeah,
always wishing you could show that to people, that's what they were going to see, especially at a big gig like this one where it's recorded and filmed. In fact, usually I avoid ever letting anybody film anything unless we have like 2 or 3 shots at it, just so the
right.
nerves can, I mean, when you do your movies, right? I mean, I assume that you get to do it till you think, somebody thinks it's really good, but
I'm a one take guy. I only do one take because it's always perfect. So why bother?
yeah, I'm
No,
not like
God,
that.
we do. I do sometimes, like if it's a big scene or a big joke or something, we're doing 20, 30 takes of
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, we're the same, so I mean, if I've got the musicians in the studio and we can do, a song 20 times, that only takes about a couple of hours. It's not that long, so people go, I
Yeah,
can't believe you played so much. I'm like, well, it doesn't seem like that much. But then you get the opportunity, just like I imagine you do in film, of going back through it, like with the editing brain, like the brain that's not work. I mean, if it's your movie in particular, and you look at it and you go, well, take three was actually the best. I mean, we did 20, but we never actually did as well. But you don't have that ability to judge yourself while it's happening in real time. So you can just
yeah,
get all you can and hope it's in there somewhere. And
yeah,
that's how we did this record, because we didn't fix things. We just did a lot of takes, and everybody left. And then the pandemic hit, and then I did the jigsaw puzzle thing of like, look, digging through this stuff. What have we got here? I knew we
yeah,
had it. We all knew. We always would stop. I'd say, does everybody think they got it? And someone would say, oh, can we do another take? And we do, but eventually everyone would say, I think we got it. And when everybody thinks they got it, you probably got it. And in this case, they got it. So we
I
got it.
think it was gotten.
It was
I,
God.
I think you guys got it.
We
Uh,
got it.
I really want to jump into some fan questions, but there's one more thing I just want to just tackle first. That's kind of an umbrella to this whole chat. And first, let me just say, huge congratulations. I mean, this is an incredible. Every album is an incredible accomplishment. It's so much work. It's so much vulnerability, and I've been your fan for so long, uh, and it's just so cool to see you keep churning at such a high level and challenging yourself like this. Let tell the tell the fans and me a little bit more about the origin of this album, kind of conceptually from your heart, from kind of sort of those things that the music doesn't tell us.
Well, okay. There's been a couple records of this in this idiom that I've made, and one is called Drive, and I know you know about it because I know you played one of the tunes on The Office, if I remember right. Didn't you do
Wait.
Whitewater at some point?
Oh, I play Whitewater. It's one of my favorite tunes
Yeah.
in all of music. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. I can't remember if I played that on The Office.
I think you did, but
Yeah.
at any rate, by the way, one take. First
No,
take. First take. First take. Yeah, we
that
did. That was the night we were getting the sounds in the studio, and we did Whitewater as the first song, and we played that take, and we all came in and listened to it, and Tony Rice said something like, "Yeah, I think we got it," and I said, "Can we do a couple more just to see what we get?" Along the lines of what we were just talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
See what you get. So we went back out there on the floor and we played a few more takes, and we came back in and listened, and everybody thought, nodding their head, and Tony says, can we hear the first one again? And put on the first one, everybody was like, wow, So, that was, one of those
It's
cases.
so great.
Yeah, I mean, we made that record in, I think 3 days. But mean, I don't think we used all the 3 days either. Everybody was just so on it. And with Tony Rice playing rhythm, I mean, it was pretty hard for anything not to sound good. He made everybody sound so good. So anyway, there was Drive in, I guess, 88. I think it came out in 1988. And then Bluegrass Sessions came about, I think, 11 years later, after I'd been doing the Fleck tones for quite a while, and I thought it would be neat to, to touch base on bluegrass and show a lot of the people who like the Fleck tones, like how great bluegrass could sound, if they could hear Tony Rice and Sam Bush and, Stewart and Jerry Douglas, and it would be like, wow. The people who dug Dave Matthews and liked the jazzier stuff I was doing, they might not know about that stuff. So I made Bluegrass Sessions, and that was 1999. And then all this time went by, just it's kind of like the calendar going boo 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 boo, and all of a sudden, every once in a while I'd go, God, I'd like to make another record, with those guys, but I couldn't get Tony, and he stopped responding. He kind of went away, he was going into his isolated period, and he wouldn't react. So at a certain point, I couldn't see doing this music without him, So it was, and then this thing happened about 20 years later, and it had something, I can't explain exactly why, but it had to do with this illness that my son Theodore had. Very close call we had, where we were in the hospital and we didn't know what was going to happen, if he was going to make it, and he made it, but it just shook us all to the core. And it was like almost right after that, I was like I just felt myself driven to make this record, and I don't know why. I could have been, why then, what it had to do with that, I can't quite explain, but it was something about time is going by, things are out of control, you can't control the world, anything could happen, all of us are getting older, and maybe it was also a comfort of like touching base to something. I don't know, for me, this kind of music is kind of safe, it's a safe haven. Some of the things that I do, I tend to do things where I'm doing something that hasn't been done before on the banjo, so it's a little bit scary. Like I'm always waiting for somebody to say, hey, you, get out of here. You're not supposed to be in this orchestra. You're not supposed to be with these African guys. You're not supposed to be playing with Chick Corea, whatever it is, and so I'm always feeling like a bit of an outsider or like an imposter. But in bluegrass, I don't really feel like that. I feel like this is a home land for me, and on some level, I want to come back to it regularly. I always love playing with these guys, So so that's what I decided to do. But at first, I was going to do something because I couldn't get Tony. I was going, well, I'll just do something with a whole new bunch of guys, and I got Michael Cleveland, and I got Paul Cowart, and Cody Kilby, and Dominic Leslie to come over to the house for a jam, and I happened to send along some charts of some things that I had.
A controlled jam. A jam with parameters.
Yeah, a jam with one guy on each instrument who happened to be some of my favorite guys that ever played their instruments. Here's some tunes we might play. So they all showed up, and it was ridiculously cool. They were great, and I was like, wow, okay, I guess maybe this is what I'll do. And then it won't be, me trying to do Drive and Bluegrass Sessions without Tony Rice, who was just really not playing at all at this point. So, but then after I did 5 tracks with them, I started having this buyer's remorse thing. And I was talking to Abby, and I was saying, hey, I don't know why I'm not, I haven't done a record like this in 20 years. Why am I not playing with Sam Bush and Jerry Douglas and Stewart and Mark Schatt, the guys that I've done this, my peers, my guys. And she said, well, why don't you do a record with, with them too? Why don't you have them on some tracks too? And I said, no, you don't understand. That's not what I do. When I do a record, I do a band and we do the whole record, and the same musicians are what give it continuity as the tunes are varied and so forth. And she said, oh, sorry. And then, of course, I thought about it. I was like, really good idea. Sorry, honey. Yeah. You're right about that. So I called Sam and Jerry and Stewart and Edgar Meyer, who I didn't really expect to say yes, and he said yes too. And then I got those guys, and I thought, well, if I've got, these guys, and I've got these guys, well, why aren't I asking Chris Thiele to do something? I mean, we've been playing together. We've been, really musical friends for a long time, and there's some things that happen with him that don't happen anywhere else. Like, why wouldn't we be playing together? And then Billy Strings sort of just walked into my life, just showed up. Everyone had been talking about him, and
it was a musical rom-com.
Yeah, exactly.
Just walked into your life.
Ironically, the first song in this record is called Vertigo, and I was suffering from vertigo. And I was playing the first gig since I'd had vertigo, and I felt terrible till I played. It was a solo set. I played a solo set. I finished the set, went back to the hotel room, was sitting in the hotel room, looked out the window, and there's Billy Strings unloading his own van. This was a while back. he was unloading his own van at this point and pulling things out. And I yelled out, "Hey, Billy!" He said, "Who's that up there?" I said, "Béla." He said, "Oh, I want to say hi." I said, "Yeah, I want to say hi too." So I came down and we chatted a little bit. And I said, "If you ever want to play, let's get together." He said, "Yeah, I'm going home." I said, "Well, I'm going home too." And he came over after the kids were asleep, and we had this jam. And I said, "Oh, I think Chris would really like playing. I think, have you ever played with Thiele?" And he hadn't, and they both got excited about it. And then Chris said, "Why don't you ask Billy Contreras to play?" Because it was clear that these guys were going to do the wiggiest stuff on the record. This was where we were going to do the, you know, the
The
flying,
Wiggy stuff.
the wiggy stuff,
Yeah.
right? So we had a wonderful session with those guys, and so now I was getting like more music than I needed for this record. And then I got another tap on my shoulder from Abby. No girls on this record, Béla. It's like, oh no, unconscious bias or something. So
Mhm.
and that's when I thought, well, I'm crazy about Molly and Sierra. That makes sense. I love their playing. We've gotten together to play. There's a relationship there, and so they came over and we did some tracks with them, and that gave me the opportunity to have some more people. So that's the long winding road, and pretty soon I had 19 tracks, and it was a double album, and I had to stop somewhere. There's a lot of people I didn't get to have that I'm disappointed about, but
Yeah,
because
well, I wasn't gonna bring it up, but I mean, I didn't. I guess I didn't get the email or something, but it's okay. I mean, I get it. I get it. Let's move on.
computers
Uh,
are complicated. I mean, weird things happen
yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
um, all right, let's jump into some fan questions, and let's start with Elise has a great question. In your opinion, what is the mark of great musicianship? Do any qualities outweigh others, e.g., passion versus technique?
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, the music they're actually playing is a big deal to me. Like, what are you choosing to play? Because you could have, if it's a great tune and the technique isn't perfect, you still love that tune. But if it's not a great tune and the guy's playing their butt off, you go, or lady, um, then you go, nice playing, but not likely to put it on again. And also, if there isn't that sense of something right about their playing, something special and deep, that it means something, because playing can be meaningless or it can be meaningful, and why is a puzzle. You think about all the great jazz players out there, but some of them, when you hear them, they speak to you, and they may not speak to every. Different players speak to different of us. Their talents speak to us in different ways. Um, so I don't know if that's a good answer, but I think you need it all. I mean, you need to play with passion. There are people who are all about precision, and they're great, and that's a great part of their playing. But there has to be some musical meat, underneath the technique, for me.
Yeah, some gusto, some spirit there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always think it's like how much is the musician actually enjoying is not the right word, but sort of getting fed by the music that they're playing,
Mm,
or sort of getting some sense of gratification. Because a lot of times a musician is pouring their heart into something, and it's almost tortured. But it's
right.
incredible, right? And it's something,
Right.
so it's not always fun. But you can sort of see and feel. And other times somebody's just wailing and having the best time. And
Right.
both examples, it's sort of like the musician uh, is feeding something in themselves with this music, and that's what I always gravitate towards. Like
Yeah,
you
and
can
that
feel
has
it.
something to do with like authenticity too, because
Yeah,
if you can feel that it's real for them and that they're really committed to it, that makes you listen in a different way, than if it's flip. But I think it's neat in a good show should have all of that. There should be times where you're really fighting for it, and times where you're just sailing. And music can be funny, and it can be sad, and it can cover a lot of emotions, a good show should have more than one emotion. you know. Uh,
uh, all right,
Good
I'm gonna
music.
jump. Well, keep. Did I cut
No, I'm
you
just
off?
saying good, not just a good show, but good music.
Yeah.
It should also needs to express the humanity of the person that's playing in it in some way. That's the stuff that
Amen.
matters. Yeah.
Um, Here's a question from Jen. I, I think this is a cool question. It puts you on the spot a little bit. Other than Earl Scruggs and Bill Monroe, if you could tip your hat to up to three bluegrass players of your YORE, what that inspired this album, who would they be? I'm going to broaden that question to just be that inspire you
Yeah.
also. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, Tony Rice is a huge one, and partly for the reason, what we were just discussing about. For some reason, you cared about his music. Something about it made you. It wasn't just like, I mean, yeah, all the amazing playing was wonderful, but it served, cool music. The music itself, this, beyond his playing, was really something special, and he went deep in a very sort of stark way, you know. So I mean, and also the rhythm, like the fact that he could make the music dance,
yeah,
was a really big deal to me because when I realized that the music could feel like that when we made Drive, I realized, wow, like this is what actually it was when I played on Cold on the Shoulder, that album. I got to go out and play with him and Sam, together, and it was like, wow, I just didn't know it could feel this good. I mean, I kind of knew, but I'd never experienced it in person like it. So Tony is a big one. Another guy is my banjo teacher, Tony Trishka. So two Tonys, two Tonys. Um, Tony Trishka, led the way, continues to, blow minds and do amazing things on the banjo, and with all the factors that we've discussed, with creativity, incredible technique, soul, yeah, just an amazing imagination, and he's got pegged as the modernist. And early on, he took a lot of hits, for being a guy who was, just being himself. He gave me that, be yourself thing. And unfortunately, I was trying so hard to be him when I was a kid, learning to play the banjo. It was really disappointing. I wasn't as interesting a self as I thought he was, and I still would say that there's some truth to that. But he's just, great as a person, but as a banjo player, nobody's taking it further than him. And a lot of what I've done has been built on things that he did, that he started. He had an idea, went on to something else. I was like, I'm going to do something with that idea, I'm going to grow that out, because I had to find ways to differentiate myself from him and do things that he wasn't doing when I first was
was
coming.
he your first teacher?
He was my third teacher.
Third teacher.
Yeah, first one was Eric Darling, who was a folk type of banjo player who played in the Weavers after Pete Seeger left. This was all in New York City. And the next one was Mark Horowitz, great banjo player, played all, could show you anything, that had been done, basically from Don Reno to Alan Mundy to Bobby Thompson to Bill Keith. He was an expert on all this stuff, and still is. And then at a certain point, I was asking, Mark made the mistake of playing me some of Tony's music and saying, well, this is the cat. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I said, then every week I was saying, teach me more Tony stuff. And he would try to stay ahead. And then one day he was like, here's Tony's number. He lives in the Bronx. Stop bothering me, kid. It was exhausting to try and keep up, with
Yeah.
Tony's music. And then I started taking lessons with Tony, and then it was, that was another joy. They were all great teachers. It was a real joy. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So that's two Tonys. We got one left. The question was for three bluegrass musicians of yore. And by the way,
What is
Tony
your?
Rice and Tony Trishka are kind of on the line of yore,
Yeah,
right?
Tony is now your, but Tony Rice is your, but Tony Trishka is not really your because he's out there, he's doing it, and he's playing great and vital. But yeah, but still, because of his place in the banjo pantheon and my life, and particularly, he's got to be right up there. Now let's see, who else aren't we allowed to do? Earl Scruggs. Does it have to be a bluegrass player?
Up to three bluegrass players. That was the question. We're going to stick to Jen's
Yeah.
rules here.
Oh man, it's hard. I mean, Bill Keith is coming into my mind right now as another guy who just had this very. They all have a way of playing like themselves. Like they don't sound like anybody else.
Yeah.
What Bill Keith did is he's just another one for me. But
Where does John Hartford fit into
Oh, thank you.
Ah.
That's what I should have said. Why didn't I say that? Oh my God, John.
I mentioned John Hartford because I love to hear Tony Trishka always talks about like the impact that John has had on him.
I always talk about John. Yeah, he's
it's so cool to hear all the specifics. I think Tony Trishka has such a great mind for, like, he just is so appreciative of other musicians and to hear him express. Uh, John Hartford is one of the people I never met and just would have loved to
Oh
have
man,
loved
he
to have
was the
known.
best. He was really something, and he was actually my favorite of the Newgrass world in terms of somebody who built some music that I really loved, like just loved, like especially area playing and morning bugle and things like that, and the
Hmm.
low banjos and that way of droning, like that droning kind of banjo that I have really taken a lot from John Hartford in a lot of his techniques, but in particular his writing. I mean, some of his
Yeah.
writing is just so imaginative and yeah, very musical. And I was very fortunate to have a good, really strong relationship with him. That after I joined Newgrass Revival, we were around him a lot, and he's the guy who introduced me to Earl Scruggs the first time. Took me over to Earl's house to play because Earl was kind of he was in hiding. He was I don't think he was feeling very good because a few years later he had this quintuple bypass, but you couldn't find him in the years when I first moved to Nashville. And one day I was talking to John, and he said, have you hung out with Earl? And I said, I haven't. And he said, well, we're going to fix that. And he brought me over to meet Earl. And I think we're a little nervous that I was going to be too much of a fancy pants banjo player. So he brought me over as a guitar player. And so I played rhythm guitar with him. And it was a really good
Wait,
guitar player
John
there.
Hartford was nervous that you were too fancy pants, or you were too nervous?
John was nervous that I was going to intimidate. Like, the Earl doesn't intimidate, is actually the truth. Now that I got to know him, he wasn't the kind of guy that would feel that way. But John was just being a little careful. So I came over and I played guitar, and I just tried to play rhythm guitar the way Earl Scruggs would like it for, the whole session. And then at the end, John said, Béla plays a little bit of banjo. And Earl said, well, pick us one. And so I got out my banjo, and young buck that I was, I think I played a Charlie Parker song for him. And he said, they said it couldn't be done. And anyway, but as years went on,
They said it shouldn't be
shouldn't be
done.
done. That was more, maybe I misheard him. But as the years went on, we got to be good friends, and he lived about 2 miles from here on just down Franklin Road, and I would go see him quite a lot, especially when he was not playing that much anymore. He was, in the later years. And one time I came over, and he said, I'm playing one gig this year. And I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. I said, I'm thinking about cutting back a little bit after this. It was very funny, very dry.
That's great.
But it was great. It was neat to get to know
Um,
him.
all right. Well, this is fun. I like these incoming questions. Wendy wants to know. It looks like you're using all microphones instead of pickups on your instruments. Why did you go that way, and what kind of mics are you using?
Yeah, well, like to me, there's something about bluegrass music that needs to be on microphones. And part of it is that pickups can be very helpful in loud situations, obviously, in being heard. But there's something about the magic of a bluegrass band that has all this give and take. And when you get closer to when the soloist gets near the microphone, he gets louder. And when you've got a pickup, sometimes you're louder when you're playing your backup than when you play your leads. Because when you play hard with a pickup, it often gets quieter. The pickup can't handle it. So you lose the power of, like, okay, it's the banjo break, and now the banjo is loud, so everyone is following that energy. When you're on a microphone, you have to follow that energy, because it's louder. It gets louder. Everybody can hear it. And so the trick with that is, obviously, that can be a real feedback problem in terms of, you know, ringing, the PA going crazy, especially in a bigger place like someplace like Rocky Grass. And the way we got around that is to use the ear monitors. And the ear monitors mean we can use really nice, actually, studio mics in a live situation and still get the volume up there out front for the audience. So it's not going to be this like, I can't quite hear you guys. I know you're playing some good stuff, but I can't hear it because you can't turn the mics up very much if the monitors are live, if you have live monitors. I hope I'm not talking Greek to everybody, but by having no live fold back monitors coming back towards the mics, everything's in our ears, we could really turn those mics up out front and have a strong presentation. And then when I got to mix this show that we just heard, and it sounded like almost like a studio level recordings. And that's what I want to bring out to the audience as we go out on tours. I want to go out and play where the instruments sound great and where we have the correct dynamics that bluegrass should have, where each lead instrument leads the whole group, and they follow it with a lot of a lot of listening, and that gets real easy when you step up to a microphone, and it's in your ear too. It's even tighter, and that's part of why the band sounded so tight, because we're hearing each other so well
Yeah.
that even this music is not, and you follow each other's energy. You almost can't not listen to each other, and I feel like great music making has so much to do with listening, and when it's not great, it always has to do with not hearing properly. And yeah, live sound can be a bear. So, we went in early, we did a sound check, we did it with the ears, we used nice mics, we liked what we were hearing, everybody was happy, and everybody really listened.
That's awesome. And that was an answer. That was a question for the real tech geeks among us, of which I am one. So I appreciate you going down that road.
Well, guys like Tony Rice and David Grisman were really felt very, and David still, of course, feel very, very strongly about that pickups are not going on their instruments. Tony used to come, say, no, I'm not putting a pickup on Clarence White's old D28. Grisman was like, nah, I'm not doing it. And they suffered the slings and arrows of feedback. In a lot of shows, I saw a lot of really tough shows where these guys were playing so great, but it was just hard, and they went, hey, that's what you get. We're still making that choice for mics instead of pickups. Well, now technology has come to a point where, you can have the best of all the worlds.
All right. I'm going to throw another question of my own into the mix here, because I'm dying to know about we heard a lot about the origin of this album and sort of the process of the kind of where it came from in your life and in your mind and soul. Where did the title of this album come from?
Okay, so another mentor, I was going to say his name if I could have said a non-bluegrass player, but Chick Corea is just one of the great piano players of all time, and I was a big fan of his. Like, I had this Earl Scruggs moment where I was like, wow, I got to learn how to do that. And then in high school, somebody played a Chick Corea track called Spain, and I had that same, very, oh my God, what is this, kind of feeling. And over the years, I got to know him and I got to play with him quite a bit. And he became a mentor to me, the way Tony was, and maybe even more so, because we just played a lot of duo shows and traveled and talked a lot, and we're good friends, which I still can't believe happened. I don't believe that I knew Earl Scruggs, that I don't believe that I played with Tony Rice, and I don't believe that Chick Corea and I became pals, but we did. But at any rate, he had an album he put out called My Spanish Heart, and one of the things people who love Chick Corea love about it, he was just so good at that Latin stuff, just his sense of time and the way he would place things. It was like, wow. And so he put out this album called My Spanish Heart. Well, come to find out, when I met him and started traveling with him, he's an Italian guy from the Boston area. He was not Spanish at all. There's no Latin, in him at all. And yet, I would say that Latin sound was like close to the center of who he was. So here I am, like a New York City kid growing up, on 100th Street and West End Avenue in the 60s, and for some bizarre reason, Earl Scruggs pops up on Beverly Hillbillies, and I'm like, wow, what is that? And I fall for this thing, and then all of a sudden, years go by, and I choose this for a life, to play the banjo. There's none of this in my family. There's no connection to country music or bluegrass or folk music. None of that anywhere around in my family. So I felt like I was looking for a name for this record, and I thought, my bluegrass heart. In a way, it's a tribute to Chick, and in a way, bluegrass is at the center of everything that I do. If I do an orchestra piece, if I play with Chick, if I play with Indian musicians, African musicians, bluegrass is just in the center of me, and I'm not from it.
Yeah.
So that gives me a certain license. And if you listen to My Spanish Heart, it's a very progressive Latin album. Honestly, it's a very Chick Corea album with a lot of Latin nods and but he just did his own thing with it. And so for me, that was a bit of an inspiration too, more than a bit of an inspiration. And I asked him about it before he passed. I said, I've got a bluegrass record. I can't wait for you to hear it. And I said, but how do you feel about me calling it My Bluegrass Heart? And he said, great. He laughed. He said, you don't have to ask me. He said, great.
That's so
but
sweet.
I wanted to ask, I wanted to ask. Yeah.
That's really lovely. We've kind of waded into this other topic that is full of landmines, but I have to kind of throw it in. just for a second here. I don't know that I haven't seen anyone ask this, but you by putting these albums out and by sort of claiming the moniker bluegrass in this context, you're I think challenging what a lot of bluegrass purists would consider what bluegrass is. And so I wonder if you can just speak, and again, this is a fraught question. I don't want you to make any enemies here, but
Yeah.
but what does the word bluegrass mean to you?
There's some things about bluegrass that this music has in it. For one thing, it's written for bluegrass band. That's the instrumentation. There's a drive. People talk about the ancient tones.
Mm,
There's all of these aspects to bluegrass that are in this music. And back when I did Drive, that it seemed like a pretty progressive record. But now in the current climate, it doesn't seem progressive at all. So I think, in a way, it's if you're going to serve bluegrass, you need to bring something new to it. You know, I would be the first to say if you wanted to ask me what traditional bluegrass is, I wouldn't be pointing at all the tracks on this record. There's some tracks I could say, well, these four, you could say could fit in that world, and Don Reno might play this tune, or you might hear this fiddle tune played. Maybe even five of them could fit in that world, and some of them would go into the newgrass world, which
mhm.
hey, Newgrass Revival got put in the Bluegrass Hall of Fame last year, so they thought we were connected somehow. But for me, Nickel Creek is part of it. Punch Brothers is part of it. But they're the edge of it. There's the other edge too. So I always remember the magazine Bluegrass Unlimited. I always liked the title, and I wish they felt more like that. Some of the earlier years where there were people were
Same.
angry at this person or that person because
Yeah,
they actually were trying to do unlimited bluegrass.
right.
Anybody who's sitting around worrying about what people think about what they're going to do are not being creative, the way they ought to be. I think you shouldn't be afraid of. You shouldn't make art out of fear.
Mhm.
So we have a little too much of that in bluegrass. A little bit of like shame. Like as a Yankee, first of all, and second of all, with banjo music, there was a lot of when I was coming up. This is the way you do it. Earl Scruggs, J.D. Crowe. This
Right.
is, and then if you weren't doing it, there was a slight sense of shame that you couldn't be that, and yet I wasn't
I
ever going
think
to
there's
be
still
that.
that's still out there. That sentiment is still out there.
Well,
Uh,
luckily,
I'm,
there's a lot of people that are great at that,
yeah,
and they are the other side of unlimited. There's
right.
unlimited, well, variety, and a music is rich when there's a lot of different points of view. It's really a problem when there's only one point of view that's everyone is ascribing to. That's when it gets very um, same. And
Yep.
I've seen this problem in jazz. I love Wynton Marsalis, for instance, but he's such a strong, opinionated person and such a press magnet. Everything he said got all the attention for a number of years, and like it was like nobody else was being asked anything about jazz. He was the authority. He's one really good opinion, but there would have been great to have like five opinions that strong, all debating. So, at any rate, I think this record is like bluegrass in the way Chick Corea's record is like Latin music. It owes a huge debt to it, and bluegrass is the jumping off point. And there's a lot of respect for where it all comes from, but not fear.
I love that. I want to put a finer point on two things you just said. One is, uh, I and I think these are the words you used. If you're not serving bluegrass unless you bring something to it, is that what you said?
I did.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a beautiful sentiment and something that there's a lot profound in there. And the other thing you said was that the album Drive, may not feel progressive now. I respectfully disagree. I think it still feels like an incredibly progressive, creative output from some incredible artists. And I love. I remember I saw the Punch Brothers at Telluride one time. They for a while were doing Sea Rock City, one of your
Oh
songs
yeah.
from
Yeah.
Drive. They were that was part of their set for a while, and the banjo player Noam Pikelny would introduce that song, and one thing he said that I loved was that as a banjo player he saw that album Drive as an emancipation proclamation for for bluegrass musicians in a way. And
Mm.
there's something that I think is really cool about the spirit of freeing that sort of musical ambitions of people in the bluegrass space.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I'd love to take credit for it, but the honest truth is that all of these guys were doing it before me. Tony Trischka was doing it, but it wasn't as well received. He was getting the slings and arrows, and I didn't get
yeah,
them because he'd already,
he'd
battened
taken
down.
all of them.
He'd taken them all of them. So now, by the time I came along, just a few years later, it was like, yeah, people play like that, and they play like this, and it wasn't like, oh, um, it wasn't like, what are they doing to our music? It was people that didn't like it didn't get as angry. But also, Tony Rice had already done done dog music. Grisman had done stuff. Newgrass Revival. There was a whole community of people. Tony, Andy Statman, the whole New York crew, all over the country. It was kind of like you ever hear about like an animal in different parts of the world that suddenly makes the same leap,
Uh-huh.
or Bill Keith and Bobby Thompson, inventing the melodic style in different parts of the countries. It was just time for
Right.
music to reflect the current times, and people
Yeah.
were taking that. So I was very inspired by all those people, and they're the ones that actually set us all free. I was just continuing down the road.
What's the tune? What's that Andy Statman Trishka album that they did with? Was it Pike County Breakdown? That just
Yeah,
goes, it just goes bananas in
yeah,
the greatest way.
right.
That's yeah,
Nobody ever did that before.
and
You
that
know what I'm
was
saying?
yeah,
Nobody
that
ever did.
was early. Yeah, that was some
That
really
was my Bible. Those records were my Bible,
cool.
and they pointed the way. All the guys that were doing it first, that were pushing it. But one other point about that, since we're on it, is as a jazz fan, which I am, I've always heard about how Coltrane left, went out and listened to other music, including African music, and came back to jazz, Indian music, African music, all these different things, and came back to jazz. And it kind of changed the face of jazz when he came back. He brought this new stuff from outside of it, and then it all got incorporated to where it become, very common now in the jazz of today. Or even Charlie Parker playing, a more of a 12 tone kind of. I think of him as the Bach of jazz. He's the guy who started using all 12 notes and all 12, all the keys
Mm.
in such a profound way, such a musical way. But after that, everybody did it, But he got that he listened to some Schoenberg and he listened to some classical stuff, and he had that kind of head on him anyway. But he took things from outside, brought them back in, and jazz became the richer for it. Now you may have a point like where you don't like jazz after, like, man, I don't like jazz after the Miles years when he was with Coltrane, where I don't like it after Wayne Shorter, or when it turned into this. Now it's when Miles got into um, who am I thinking of? The funk stuff, and a lot of people were like, yeah, that jazz after that hadn't been any good. And that's I respect their right to like it before, but I think they're the ones that lose out, if they don't check out what happened. They're the ones. It's okay to have your preferences, but you might not have as much great stuff to dig. That's the only thing. If you just, I only, and I've been an elitist myself about music, and maybe being with Abby has helped me grow out of it. But I just find there's a lot of things to like out there, and they don't have to be you. They don't all have to be you, but you can appreciate them. You can.
Sounds like we have Abby to thank for a lot of
Oh yeah,
a
I'm a
lot of
better
what's great,
I'm a
a
better
lot of
person since she
how
came
you've
around.
evolved into
Yeah,
the wonderful person that you are.
well,
All right, this is maybe the most important question that I've seen submitted so far,
yeah.
and it's
You want me to answer it before you ask it?
uh, sure.
Billy Connolly.
No, that's not one of the answers.
Okay.
But I love that. What question was on your mind?
Who's the better banjo player, Ed Helms or Steve Martin?
Yes, that's the question.
And the answer is Billy Connolly.
I don't get it.
I don't either. That's just my sense of humor.
All right,
No, I
that's
think you guys are awesome. I'm just thrilled about both of you.
the right answer to that question is Steve Martin, by the way, without a doubt.
I haven't
Um,
heard you play that much, so I can't give you the straight up.
I'm kind of shy.
Yeah, I understand.
I
Territory.
and I get and I'm very rusty right now because I've I have two very little kids, and um, they don't, for some reason, they're not soothed by 45 minutes of banjo arpeggios.
Yeah,
So,
I
um,
know about that too.
all right, here's
And
a
it's funny
question. Go
about
ahead.
not being a prophet in your own land, but these they could give a darn about this banjo,
Yeah,
you know. But,
exactly.
so I have to hide out to do it. I have to go downstairs. I can't even practice the banjo upstairs in the house, with the kids because they just, you know.
Oh, this is a great question for the music nerds among us again. So this is from Armando. What banjos did you use for this record? Will there be a place where we can see all that info for each tune? And before you answer, um, I'm gonna mess this up. Is the song there's a cello banjo? Is it Hunky Dory?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. Okay.
You're
So
good.
that's
Hmm.
uh, that tune. I just want to just say something. I thought that's one of my favorite tunes on this record
Oh,
because
thank you.
yeah, it's just such a cool structure that it's like a series of duets
Right,
and then this kind of grand ballroom dance with everybody
right.
and and everyone gets to talk to this very strange instrument, the cello banjo.
Yeah,
And I particularly love, was it Paul on bass for that
Edgar,
part? Edgar.
Edgar
Yeah,
Meyer.
there's something about
Yeah.
those two sounds, the bass and the cello banjo, they're kind of in the same register. They're wildly different timbres, but they just, it's such a cool mesh.
Right.
So
So,
a lot
but
of people,
also a lot of John Hartford in that set of tunes. It's really
sure.
a set of tunes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's,
what I was going to, yeah, go ahead.
well, allow me to gush more about your song. um, and now I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, here's what
It's
I
a
was
cool
going to tell
song.
you about
Hunky
that
Dory is a
song.
cool song.
Well, thank you. So Hunky Dory, like when I was getting to the end of the record, and I was like, I've got all these tunes, I can't get them on the record, and I was, having some more remorse, and then I came up with this idea of all these fiddle tunes. Like, because I write tunes, I write a lot of tunes. Some of them are okay. I had over the years, I've been hanging on to the ones I thought were decent, and I had a little pile of fiddle tunes. And unfortunately, for the variety of the record, I couldn't do a whole bunch of them. I could only pick two or three for the album, where we played one tune all the way through for 6 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. So I had all these tunes sitting around, and I was trying to figure out what can I do with all these tunes, and that was the idea that I came up with. And I had written that main melody, thinking a lot about John Hartford. So thank you for bringing him up because he's key to that tune. That funky low banjo thing, I was thinking he would really dig the cello banjo. He would have
Yeah,
loved it, because he liked to be
for
down
sure.
in low C, and so and then I just tried to figure out what keys would these have to be in to tell a story. And I told everyone it was just an experiment. Just play this tune with me. It was a studio assembly type of thing where I laid down the whole cello thing, and then when David Grisman was here, I said, "Could you just come?" He's like, "Okay, bye." I was like, "Oh wait, could you just play? It's only 30 seconds. Could you just play here?" Okay, and he did some, and I got each person to do it, and none of them, I think, even remembered doing it, later on in talking
That's
to them.
funny.
That was one of those things. And there was what keys would it need to be so that it landed properly back in the home key? And it's also a bit of a rondo. Do you know what a rondo is?
It's some classical music form that I can't bring to mind.
Yeah, I think a rondo is supposed to be you play a part, then you play another part, then you play the first part again, then you play a third part, then you play the first part again, then you play a fourth part. And I think in a perfect rondo, someone's going to tell me I'm wrong, then you do it all backwards and you go back. But you play the first part between every single section, and you have a bunch of
Okay.
sections. So I was thinking about making it a rondo, but it didn't really hold up all the way, but it was a good inspiration for that form. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're running out of time. Uh,
Banjos.
what's that? Yeah,
Banjos.
banjos. Tell us about the
Quick.
banjos.
I'll go
Also,
quick.
please tell us if these banjos have names
Yeah.
and why if they have names, why they have certain names. Do you
Okay,
name
well,
your instruments?
I'm going to make it brief. I had to name the banjos just so that our stage crew would know which one to get me when I called for an instrument. So yeah,
Okay.
we called one of them Spunky and one of them Clarissa, but I don't really do that anymore. But on this album, except for the tune you mentioned, every single song is my 1937 Flathead. style 75, which I've been playing for years. It's pretty hard to beat. But on the TV show, I just wanted to mention this because the builder really wanted me to mention this, and I do too. That Gold Tone made me a new banjo. There's a song that we played called Strider, which where I use the tuning pegs a bunch, and that's this instrument that Gold Tone has been building for me. That's pretty much a very good copy of my banjo. You can see the bluegrass heart there on the end, and also we're
Oh,
making a
cool.
banjo tuner. So that's a plug. I apologize for that, but it's a really good sounding banjo. I didn't really think they could make one I would like. I like their low banjos and the banjos that were
Sure.
not like other things that were out there, and I use a lot of them, loved them. But I really wasn't expecting them to come up with a flathead copy kind of a thing. And we've copied everything about my neck and my specs, so now there can be, and it's not going to be expensive too, which is nice. So you can put an instrument that's a lot closer to one of these old instruments in people's hands and not break their back. So there's a lot of
That's
fun.
really cool.
It's fun.
That's really cool. Gold Tone was making some like reasonable quality, very low price banjos
Yeah.
early on, like before that became the norm. And I bought a couple for as travel banjos and really
Right.
loved them. And of course the dobro banjo, the
Yeah.
dojo that they make is really fun. Yeah, they do some cool stuff.
Yeah, they do, but I really wasn't expecting to be able to like go back and forth between my old banjo, that's my favorite banjo in the world, and a new instrument and be like, hey, this sounds good too. And so I'm kind of thrilled that it's working out. It's
That's
really good.
awesome.
Yeah. That,
Well,
mhm.
I think we got to wrap this up. I don't want to. I could just chat with you for hours. It's so fun to pick your brain and just hear more about it. So on behalf of myself and all the fans that are watching, thanks for taking the time, Béla, and I hope we get to hang out soon.
Yeah,
It's been a long
man,
time.
it's a real honor that you did this. I really, really, I mean, I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to getting to know you a lot better. We really haven't gotten to spend much time together at all.
I know we've crossed paths a lot over the years, but always too brief.
So thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Well, that's going to do it, ladies and gentlemen. Béla Fleck, I'm Ed Helms. This has been an absolute blast. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves, and we'll see you next time.